Mbhazima Shilowa on the ANC, NWC, and KZN leadership crisis.
Natal provincial structure will be decided within the next 2 weeks. And this follows a meeting of the ANC's National Working Committee and the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Executive Committee, which ended in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg, yesterday. Now, the meeting was called to discuss the challenges facing the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal after securing just 17% of the vote in the May 29 election. Speculation was rife that the PEC could be disbanded after its dismal performance, which saw the newly formed MK party dislodging the ANC from power. Now, to share his views on the ANC's National Working Committee and the KZN PEC, we're now joined virtually by former Premier of Gauteng as well as a former General Secretary of Cosatu, Mbhazima Shilowa. Mr. Shilowa, thanks so much for your time and welcome to Morning Live.
Yes, good morning. Thanks for having me.
So interesting times, interesting developments looking at what's happening with the ANC and in particular KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng following dismal showings at the polls. Now, the ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says that the fate of the KwaZulu-Natal provincial structure will be decided in a fortnight and that the ANC leadership actually needs to be decisive in dealing with the two provinces. So, what is your take on these latest developments, particularly as it pertains to KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng?
I think that it was inevitable that proper stock taking would have to be done to say we had a huge majority in KZN going into the May elections. When we came out of it, we were only 17%. And we're not even the majority, or rather the leading party there. MK is the leading party with at least close to 45% there. So one has to be able to ask the tough questions. What happened? Were the leadership aware? Were they conniving? Or were some of their structures at a regional or branch level not telling the truth? So those things you need to be able to take. And obviously, the leadership there has to take some responsibility. But it is not only the provincial leadership that is there. There's also NEC members deployed in that province. What were their views? What did they see? Did they underestimate MKP? And therefore, going forward, will they be able to dislodge MKP into 2026 local government elections, or is it going to be decimation further? So I think that decision will have to be made. And it seems that the ANC's view is that, one, it's either you disband or you augment them. Disbandment just simply means you're going to be causing more strife. It doesn't mean you can do it. It just means you must be willing to accept that there's likely to be more strife. Augmentation means that you're going to have people who add there, but then may be told, look, you can't make this or that decision because you were not elected, were elected. So it may be that they will dissolve them, but keep most of the PEC members, but bringing in new people.
So if we take a bit of a deeper dive into KwaZulu-Natal and the election outcome there, it was stated yesterday that the structures in KZN are weak. The election outcome clearly shows that the party was obliterated in the province. But touching on some of the reasons that you've just given us, so far we're told the outcome was as a result of the MK party, but that the ANC fared poorly because the province also needed to work on getting its structures more in tune. But what's your take on that? Did they underestimate MK as a force to be reckoned with in KZN?
I think they did underestimate MK, but also I think, remember this very same leadership when they came in, even the previous one, relied too much on the authority of Jacob Zuma. All of them would always be going there to say, we're going to be asking for advice and all of that. So it's clear that within the region, he's still respected. It may also be that, just like in other provinces, even their own membership on the ground may also have been inflated, in terms of branches, saying we've got this and that numbers, in order to be able to influence the outcome of the provincial conference, regional conferences, but also going to Nazareth. But that when it came to doing work on the ground, it was very clear that there was no organization on the ground. So I think they underestimated, but I think maybe the structures have also collapsed.
So that last point, would you say that was by design or by default? Because there is also talk about some people within the ANC structures in KZN who actually owe their allegiance to MK rather than the ANC.
Yes, but I don't think it's the majority by design. I think most of it would have happened in the lead up to, to the conference in Nazareth in 2022. And once you have had a conference, most structures collapse. But if you also look at eThekwini, even before MK came into play, they had already lost the majority in that metro. So MK, yes, played an important role. There would have been people who were playing for both sides, as it's being said, but that could only happen also because you've got weak structures. I mean, if you look at, say, Limpopo, MKP did make some inroads there, but because the structures are solid, they were able to ensure that, no, they don't make any inroads. In Gauteng, they were able to make some inroads, both in part in terms of how structures are, but it must also mean even here, structures were weak, that people were not telling the truth. People would saying, yeah, no, we've got the numbers behind us. But even when polling was telling them differently, they kept on saying, no, those polls are not going to bring anything. So you found that people say, we will go to their rally, we will eat food, we'll take the T-shirts, but we are going to vote differently.
So in the past, Mr. Shilowa, structures have been disbanded due to several reasons. Sometimes it was over infighting that often spilled over into government. And if you look at what has been happening in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal in particular, and we're focusing on these two because the ANC seems to be focusing on these two in particular at this point in time. So if we look at what has happened previously, what will be the impact if the NEC ultimately took the decision to disband the KZN and Gauteng leadership structures?
It depends on who they bring in. I'll give you a few examples. If you look at Limpopo, Castle Matali and his PEC were disbanded. Later, a new PEC came into play. It seems that even though there may still be squabbles here and there in terms of governance, but the province have remained solid. If you look at the Northwest, there was disbanded in terms of Supra and his people. They came back, was disbanded, and it just means that you are not able to get stability in there. In Gauteng, you do have political stability, even though there was a disbandment, I think around 2000. But if you look at Free State, that first disbandment that involved Terra Likota and Ace Makashule have continued to date to hound the province. So it depends on who people bring in and how they work on it. So disbandment can work, but sometimes it doesn't work. In this instance, my view is that, if you disband, you must bring in more or less some of the same people, just augment them, because you are going into 2026 local government elections. It's going to impact on you if you don't go there united. And MK and EFF are not going to stand by and say, well, let the ANC sort themselves out. They're going to use whatever strife is there to woo more members, to woo more leaders onto their side. But secondly, you're also going to the NGC. You don't want the NGC to become a war zone and then focus on the leadership issues instead of focusing on the other issue that says the ANC has lost a majority in Gauteng, in Northern Cape, in KwaZulu-Natal, and nationally. And in a number of provinces, those have also been reduced, even though they remain the majority. How do we change our fortunes? Where are the weaknesses? How do we strengthen the organization? How do we make this renewal work not for the ANC, but work such that people who are not members of the ANC, who are voters of the ANC, look there and think, we didn't want to vote them because of corruption, maladministration, infighting, but we think now they've mended their way and therefore we need to give them another chance.
But would you think that any sort of tampering with the provincial executives in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng would, of course, lead to some alignment and, of course, some push when it comes to the NGC, because the president is in his second term. You and I spoke about this yesterday. I said, you know, in your second term, you are yesterday's man. You said you are dead men walking in your second term. So this obviously will lead to some form of contestation. Those who may be unhappy about what is done to their provinces may coalesce around that sort of disgruntlement, if nothing else.
They may coalesce in terms of that disgruntlement. But, you know, whatever coalescing, because the NGC does not make any changes to the leadership, it will just be starting to say who and who are we going to bring in. I don't think that will impact on Ramaphosa because, as we were saying, not only is he dead man walking, he's at a train station waiting to alight, you know. So what the ANC's focus, even if you have those coalescing, if you don't coalesce about, if you are in Gauteng, you have lost the 3 metros, how are you going to get back those 3 metros? You don't have a majority in Mohale City. How are you going to get back that Mohale City? Your Mfuleni as the ANC, even though you have a majority, is a mess when it comes to government. How are you going to make those changes? That is where the focus should be, rather than spilling blood on the floor.
We have just about a minute, Mr. Shilowa, just a quick one. There is, of course, also, you wrote about it as well, a school of thought that says responsibility and accountability should not only be sought from the provincial leadership of KZN and Gauteng. Mtolo from KZN basically saying that the president and the SG should equally shoulder responsibility for the ANC's poor showing overall. Your take on that?
Yes, I agree that the ANC itself fared poorly. They are at 40%. They are in government because the DA and other parties have agreed to work with them to form a government of national unity, quote unquote. So if you want to talk about responsibility, you need to say, yes, the provinces must take responsibility, but surely the national leadership would also have been aware that if we act this way or that way, these are the results that we're going to get. For instance, they would have said we're going to deal with issues of fraud and corruption. I don't think they dealt with those issues. So as a result, you must also say we take responsibility. But it is easy to disband the regions. Nobody is going to disband the NEC until at the last conference. So how does it take responsibility? And finally, like I said to you, even in that PEC in KZN, there are NEC deployees. led, say, by Zizi Kodwa, what responsibility do those people take? So I would argue everybody needs to take responsibility. It may be that the axe falls differently depending on how tall or low the tree is.
Well, Mr. Shilowa, pleasure speaking to you. Thanks so much. Former Gauteng and former General Gauteng Premier and former General Secretary of Cosatu, Mbhazima Shilowa, sharing his views on the ANC's National Working Committee and the KZN PEC meeting that took place yesterday in Boksburg.